Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Better Than Food Book Reviews. I'm your host, Clifford Lee Sargent. Great to see you as always. Hope you're doing well. Get that coffee. Delicious. Today is Perfection by the Italian author Vincenzo Latronico, translated by Sophie Hughes, published in English in 2025 and originally published in 2022. This was a kind gift from my friend and viewer Matt. Thank you very much. Quick disclosure, the publisher of this book, NYRB, New York Review Books, sometimes sends me free books for review. Perfection is a satirical contemporary novel. It follows the lives of Tom and Anna, two millennial digital nomad expats, as they fall in and out of love with Berlin. They live in their perfectly curated apartment trying to shape their lives in a manner that would gain approval on social media. Through their consumerist values and actions, the novel reveals the mundane hollowness of their existence. It draws on the literary style of a novel called Things, A Story of the 60s by the terrific French author Georges Perec, wherein Perec describes the material things belonging to a Parisian couple in the 60s as a method of revealing the emptiness of their lives. Perfection is an homage, or a kind of 21st century remake set in Berlin. Ironically, though it operates as a critique of social media, this one has become quite popular in social media. Unsurprising, perhaps. Much like the characters in Perfection, many of us struggle with feeling lost or disconnected. It is a rough time out there in the world. Life can get overwhelming, and sometimes we all just need someone to talk to, whether it's about work or relationships or just the daily grind. That's why I'd like to tell you about the sponsor of today's video, BetterHelp. BetterHelp's mission is to make finding therapy more affordable and accessible, which is helpful because finding the right therapist in person could be challenging given the slim options in your area, especially if you live somewhere rural or in a small town or you travel for work. But unlike many things these days, they make finding a therapist easy. Because it's online, it's remote, and by filling out a few questions online, BetterHelp can match you with a therapist in as little as just a few days. And it's easy to get matched with a therapist. There's a link below in the description. It's betterhelp.com/BTF. Clicking on that link helps support the show, but it also gets you 10% off your first month with BetterHelp, so you can try them out and see if it works for you. And I sincerely hope it does. And because finding the right therapist is a little like dating, if you don't initially fit with your therapist, which is a common thing in therapy, you can switch to a new therapist at any time at no additional cost without having to worry about health insurance or who's in your network or anything like that. So if you're struggling right now, and honestly, who isn't? Please consider online therapy with BetterHelp. And thanks to BetterHelp for sponsoring the show. Back to the book. At first, Perfection just seems like a quiet millennial satire. It's nicely written, economic, eloquent, an easy read with a pleasant, lightly mocking vibe. But there's something much darker at work here. It's a boring book. That's the point. It's a boring book about boring people ironically living in one of the most objectively interesting cities in the world, Berlin. There's not much going on with these characters because they have no idea what they really want. Their lives are guided by trends and borrowed desires. In their appreciation of art, in their brief political activism, in their cooking, even in their sex life. They've tried to craft interesting identities in an interesting place with interesting people, but since their identities are based on external factors, there's nothing driving them internally, and it fails. After their honeymoon phase with the city, they're bored, and boring because they're bored. It's partially about the fear of missing out. FOMO, right? The fear of being milquetoast in Berlin. It's fine to be boring. I often find it preferable. The trouble is when you feel you should be more interesting, which is exactly the problem these characters face. That's their conflict. It's the horror of the realization that they might be boring but should be interesting. They live for the approval of others, not themselves. But then that's what all of us do, isn't it? Especially on this godforsaken platform. Guilty as charged. The novel holds up a mirror. Anna and Tom are searching for an ideal of perfection in their lives, one they've never experienced before but have a faint conception of, constructed in their imagination by what other people deem to be worthy. This ideal seems to be defined in the following line from the book. A life of freedom and adventure, one full of beauty and hard work, and with occasional surprises. Sounds nice, doesn't it? Who doesn't want that? I do. But here's the thing. They've exchanged their true desires, which are unknown to them, for social validation. They want to be liked and admired and envied and appreciated. Primarily, it's a life of consumption, not production. Anna and Tom are intentionally generalized archetypes. They could be any millennial couple. We don't know where they're from. The characters themselves are embodiments of the indecision they struggle with. But I didn't care about them because there's nothing to care about. Nothing that could be loved or hated. There's nothing attractive nor repellent about these timid, insecure characters. They're just as well-meaning, amicable, endearing, and benign as any other millennial couple. In fact, there's nothing human about them, nothing flawed. There's no blood under that skin. Nothing special. Their only desire is to be seen as special, without any authentic desire for something that would make them so. The following is a quote from the book. There were moments when they felt their identity was anchored not in their thoughts or deeds, but in something fickle and brittle, a roll of the dice. They possess a kind of self-flagellating guilt from their own hopelessly inconsequential existence, a self-deprecating masochistic ennui, right? In terms of the couple's obsession with surface aesthetics and digital objectification, it's a postmodern decadent novel. They possess a fetishistic concern with what looks good. architecture, decor. Naturally, they work as web designer creatives. I think AI already ate that. They talk about that in the book. There's a motif that humorously follows a couple throughout the book. Plants. You know the type of plants. Instagram plants. Third wave coffee shop plants. The plants are taking over the world in this book. This vegetational orgy of modern copycat aesthetic banality. The plants are everywhere. I was reminded of Des Esseintes in Against Nature by Huysmans, in his attempts to reconstruct the natural world through elaborate artificial means which are doomed to failure. Against Nature is like the definitive decadent novel, so it makes sense. Perfection is more of a conceptual exercise than any sort of grand declaration or critique. An experiment in writing about desireless characters who desire true desire. There's nothing inside here that will cause any controversy. There's nothing that will offend anyone. It's a very safe novel. It's an easy read. Comfy criticism that any millennial would readily agree with, and identify with. Its popularity is a collective generational act of self-hatred. Stuff doesn't produce substance. Social media is empty marketing for fictitious idealized lifestyles. Cool places can become boring. Doing things merely for the validation of others leaves you empty inside. Cultural homogenization is a drag. Nobody's going to disagree with any of this, and simultaneously none of it will change. That's the insidious thing here, and I suspect Latronico has done all of this intentionally. There's a heavy sense of self-aware futility in Latronico's novel, like the final part of the film La Dolce Vita, in which Marcello Mastroianni has become utterly jaded with his decadent partying lifestyle. Except in the novel, in place of Marcello's emotional, violent, sadistic dissolution, there's only insecurity, boredom, and the background hum of anticlimactic despair. The characters in Perfection do not change. They only suffer minor inconveniences on the way to their goals, which in themselves are not particularly ambitious or concrete. They're going with the flow. The flow goes nowhere. But at the end of the day, they don't really seem to mind. There's no emotional rupture in their relationship, no heavy regret or resentment, no serious depression, no strong desire in any direction. Only, if anything, a mild anxiety at the lack of it. At the same time, they're not particularly hard to please. They don't ask for much at the end of the day. If one were to heavily criticize them, it would feel like punching down. They're not harming anyone, they're just trying to figure it out. Like all of us. Stable, permanent satisfaction or permanent happiness is not an achievable state, yet that's what we keep striving for, like the characters. The book diagnoses this problem without a solution. It only shows us what we already know to be the problem. At first, I felt that it was a satirical critique of the modern world that didn't go far enough. The couple's world remains too stable. Nothing ever breaks down. Latronico's a fan of Didion, he knows. Shit breaks down, the center does not hold. Why did he do that? In that respect, the book becomes fictitious, and remains as a depiction of endless, benign malaise with no strong movement one way or the other. Like Welbeck or Bernhard, but without the vicious gut punch. But then I realized, that is the vicious gut punch. Perfection is a decadent horror story, disguised as millennial satire. It's Poe. Reality for the characters is hinted at, but never confronted. Because it can never be. In a false happy ending, they merely repeat the cycle of chasing perfection. And we realize, and here you can see Latronico's influence from Poe that he spoke about in the interview below, that unbeknownst to them, the characters, they are buried alive in this cycle, like Poe's characters. The Telltale Heart, the Cask of Amontillado, the Fall of the House of Usher, the Premature Burial, they ain't getting out of this shit, bro. They are fucked. And everybody senses this, and everybody realizes they're trapped, but do you understand how insidious this thing really is? It's a horror story. There's no change in the characters, no revelation, only the hint at potential conflict that is, by chance, resolved, and they're suckered back in, trapped, imprisoned in Instagrammatic limbo, doomed to forever seek perfection at the mercy of their followers. It's a novel whose conflict is the absence of conflict. They inhabit a very modern hell, some hideous contemporary addition to one of Dante's circles. It's a soft prison of comfort, like a cushy Norwegian prison that doesn't even look like a prison. It looks like an apartment. It looks like freedom. But it's not. In his book Civilization and Its Discontents, Freud argued that our inability to be happy results from our primal sexual and violent desires being repressed by necessity in order to live in society. But these characters have no desires that conflict with civilization. Yet they're still miserable. Their deepest, darkest secret is that they don't have one. There's nothing pulsing inside there except a deep anxiety at this realization. There's a quote often attributed to Einstein, which is the following: "Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results." By the end of the book, we realize that this pursuit of perfection is utter madness. And we, online here, you and I and many we know, are completely engulfed in it. Latronico's right. We're cooked. I think it's actually a pretty terrifying book in a way, but in the subtlest possible manner. Even if Latronico was trying to write something much lighter, that's an existential horror story. That's what it is. Better than food. 4 out of 5 coffees. Subtle, clever, disturbing. I recommend it. So what did I dislike? The pleasure of reading it was not as enjoyable as thinking about it afterwards. I did find myself bored, wondering where these vignettes were leading. Only afterwards did I realize that's the point. They lead nowhere. And they never will. It seems like a real challenge to write about stuff like Berghain in a way that's boring, you know? It was like the least boring experience of my life. So who should read it? If you enjoy Georges Perec, Joan Didion, and Michel Houellebecq, check it out. And that's all I got. Thank you very much to all my patrons on Patreon for helping me keep the show going. I deeply appreciate it. Please subscribe if you have not already, and hit the thumbs up if you enjoyed this, and always remember, die reading. Alright, thanks for watching, have a good one, talk to you soon. Ciao!